So there's our Gospel of Martha and Mary serving Jesus, providing hospitality. How many of you are Marthas? This includes men as well, actually. How many of you are like Mary? No one's admitting anything. Yeah, we have a couple Marys. No Marthas. Ah, right, yes, okay. It's more like it. But when you have people who come to your home for a meal, there are at least two things you need to do at the same time. You need to provide the meal, and you need to be present with your guests, so you can enjoy one another's company and make them feel comfortable. Now, like in my house, when there's just one person, you have to split yourself in half or do something. Theoretically, when there's two people in the home, you could have a division of labor, I suppose. So one could cook, one could entertain. Jesus is using this example, actually, for a couple of reasons, I think. And one may be, it's a story on how we should entertain God in our lives. If the story were just about Mary and Martha, it would actually be pretty impolite, a bit harsh on the part of Jesus, saying, well, Martha, you just don't get it. Mary has the better part. God is simply not like any other guest that would come to your home. And he's not necessarily pleased by your rushing about, making sure the house is clean, there's not a spot of dust anywhere, the food is plentiful, cooked to perfection. God is not impressed. I would venture to say that the world we live in does not entertain God very well. Hopefully, we as a church do a better job than the world at large. But I think this story is about how we listen to God, how we listen to Jesus in every part of our lives. Lives that can so often be filled with distractions and worries and work. I shudder at my to-do list. And I'm sure most or all of you have them, whether mentally or actually written down on a piece of paper. All these things that you should do. And where I get tripped up is how to prioritize the things and not to worry about at least half of them. Am I choosing the work that actually makes a difference? Or am I just simply caught up in work so other people will think I'm productive in some way? Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I don't. In the midst of all of this, Jesus wants us to set aside at least some of that time to drop the busyness and sit at his feet. And I suppose church is a way of sitting at Jesus' feet. Not literally. I'm not Jesus and you're not my disciples. But most religions or philosophies through the ages have some sort of process, some sort of training, where disciples will sit and learn, often for years. Students of philosophy do what that word implies. They love learning. And so that's their focus. And they just love going and hearing the philosophers speak and thinking. But whatever the religion or school, the picture is often the same. People gathering around in some way, often literally or figuratively, at the teacher's feet. Much like Mary is doing with Jesus in that story. And we are asked to do this in our lives as well. But there are a few things different about the way Jesus approaches this as we might encounter it in other ways in learning institutions. First, there's those people who come to Jesus. They don't fit the usual profile of studious disciples, and perhaps we don't fit that profile either. Jesus' students, especially in this gospel that we're reading, are not the sort who would produce good Ofsted results. The last person, if you recall, 3 or 4 Sundays ago now, I think, the last person to sit at Jesus' feet was that man who was ill or possessed. He lived in the graveyard and terrorized the people in the village. Jesus cured him, and that's the man who came and sat at Jesus' feet and listened. And before that, it was that varied group of disciples that he gathered from here, there, and everywhere who came to be a part of his community. And I suppose that's one mark that's different. It's a community rather than a classroom. They were gathered to have an encounter with Jesus and with God. Jesus' disciples must take listening and being with him seriously. But even that's not enough, as we know. Jesus asks his disciples, even before their learning is finished, before they get their diploma or whatever, they are to start putting into practice the kinds of things that Jesus is teaching, what he wants them to do. In exchange, Jesus gives his followers a freedom they've never had before, a freedom to let go of some of those daily tasks and things that aren't necessary, that people tie themselves to, that they must do. Jesus says, let that go. Be more like Mary in this situation. But in the end, they also have a task, a vocation with God. They are there to do God's work in whatever way is suitable for them to do that. There is freedom, there's work to do. But it's all in the present, not something we're talking about, oh, we'll do that in 5 or 10 years when we have enough learning and we're confident enough. No, it's for now. And I would hope our church reflects that. I see signs of it. And I hope we feel an ease and a freedom when we gather together. A freedom in which we're not preoccupied with all the things we brought with us, or preoccupied in worship with exactly what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. We are here together as a community, worshiping God, and there should be a freedom in that. So we are inspired to take up that work that we're given to do, the things we're called to do, and to be witnesses out in the world. I love the story of Mary and Martha. I think it's often too simplified and typecast, like how I began my sermon. Martha, at some point, needs to sit and rest with Jesus. Mary cannot sit at his feet forever. She has to move on. And this is the story of our lives. We need to sit at Jesus' feet, enjoy God's world around us, and then be participants in it. In this story, poor Martha misses the experience. And yet, she knows that because she goes to Jesus and complains, why can't... She doesn't say it, but she seems to be saying, why can't I sit at your feet and Mary go and cook a meal? But that implication is that Mary will not sit there forever. She has to rise and set about the work God has given her to do. And that time comes for us. We must savor the experience, those times of restfulness with God that we can fit into our lives and make sure they're there. And then go and do the work God has called us to do. For the disciples, it was to build the church. They didn't know that, but that was their task. To build the church, even though they didn't feel up to that sort of work and experience. For us, that's what we have to figure out. What are we meant to do? Probably already doing it. But what more are we meant to do?